Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. Because so many of you have responded positively to our recent few videos covering viewer suggestions, this week we decided to do a third and final round of the cases that you sent our way. Again, we want to thank everyone who sent in suggestions. We really enjoyed the interaction from all of you, and the cases were all quite compelling to dig into. That being said, next week we'll have a whole new batch of cases for you, going back to our original format of stories based around a central theme. If you're disappointed that your suggested case wasn't covered in this or any of the other viewer-suggested videos, don't worry, we've kept a list of everything, and we'll try to find a home for it in a future video. Before we get to today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this. It really helps us to continue building the channel, and if you've watched a few of our videos already, you might not even realize that you're not subscribed. While you're there, make sure to hit the notification bell to receive updates about our future releases. With that out of the way, here is part 1 of another 3 interesting viewer-suggested cases. October 21st, 2018 started out like any other Sunday for 24-year-old Toya Cordingley. In the morning, she headed to her job at the Whole Life Pharmacy and Health Food Store in Earlville, a suburb of Cairns, Australia. She worked a short shift handing out samples before she was captured on CCTV camera going to Rusty's Markets, an iconic local weekend farmers market full of fresh produce and colorful vendors. After briefly heading home to grab her dog Indy, Toya again headed out around 2:30 p.m., telling her family that she planned to spend the afternoon at Wangeti Beach, about 40 minutes north of Cairns. Despite being relatively close to the city, the beach has spots that are not as frequented by tourists. As an animal lover, this was one of the things that Toya liked about the beach, because it allowed her to let her dog run freely. However, as the hours began to pass and the sun eventually set with no sign of Toya, it became clear that something was seriously wrong. Her boyfriend Marco was the first one to grow concerned, and reached out to her family at around 9 p.m. that night after failing to hear from her. The family immediately reported her missing, though by that time it was too dark to search the beach where she had last been headed. Desperate to begin their search, Toya's family arrived at the beach early the next morning before sunrise, and soon made 2 startling discoveries. First, they found Toya's blue 2009 Mitsubishi Lancer parked near one of the beach's entrances. This seemed to confirm that Toya had at least made it to her destination the previous afternoon, and the family began to comb the surrounding area. A little while later, Toya's mother Vanessa made a second discovery, this one even more chilling than the last. The dog she had left with, Indy, was found tied to a tree near the southern part of the beach. Though the animal was unharmed, it had reportedly been tied so tightly that it could not lie down, and had likely been stuck in an uncomfortable position for hours. This was alarming because it was not at all consistent with Toya's behavior. She would never have tied Indy up like that, nor would she have left the dog behind if she planned to go to some other part of the beach. A short time later, the family's worst fears were confirmed when Toya's father, Troy, found his daughter's nude, lifeless body partially buried near some sand dunes. He had spotted part of her foot, which had been left exposed. According to reports, her clothes and belongings were missing. Though police revealed few details regarding the cause of Toya's death, what we do know is that she was viciously attacked with a knife, and that evidence at the scene suggested that the crime could have been sexually motivated. Against the advice of investigators, some members of the family, including Toya's mother, read the full autopsy report, which they described as horrifying. The senseless murder sent shockwaves through the local community. Many wondered how such a brutal killing could have been carried out in broad daylight, without any trace of who might be responsible. At the same time, those close to Toya grieved the loss of a young and vibrant life cut short. She was described as a happy, bright, and free-spirited person, whose love for her family was rivaled only by her compassion for animals. Hundreds of people packed themselves into the church where her funeral was held a little more than a week after her murder, where friends and family paid tribute to her life. As the case began to generate publicity, Queensland police scrambled to find answers for the outraged public. In the aftermath of Toya's murder, the safety of local beaches became a topic of serious interest, as many people, especially young women, began to report uncomfortable and terrifying experiences involving suspicious characters in these areas. At the start of the investigation, police conducted a thorough search of Wangari Beach, looking for any of Toya's clothes and personal items, as well as any other evidence that might point them in the direction of her killer. The beach was closed down for several days, allowing for a team of more than 100 people to comb through a wide area around the scene, aided by police dogs, boats and divers, and aerial drones. A spokesperson for the investigation would later inform the public that the search had turned up, quote, bits and pieces, though it was never reported exactly which of Toya's belongings might have been found. Police also released footage of cars traveling on the Captain Cook Highway near the time of Toya's disappearance, asking for drivers to identify themselves. The highway runs along the northeastern coast of Queensland and is the most direct route between Cairns and Wangari Beach. At the same time, police asked the public to come forward with any additional dashcam footage or other video that they might have taken in the area. They also advised anyone who saw Toya that day or who might have seen anyone suspicious in the area to come forward with that information. It soon became clear that the public was more than happy to aid in the investigation. By mid-November, authorities announced that they had already received over 800 Crime Stopper tips and that they were working through the information that had been provided. A statement from one witness became of particular interest when he told police that he had attended a gathering on the northern end of Wangari Beach on the day of Toya's murder, and that he had been flagged down by two men at the side of the road when he left. The witness said the men were, quote, in a highly agitated state, which didn't seem to make sense since they were dealing with a simple flat tire. Though the tip ultimately turned out to be a dead end after authorities said they had cleared the men of suspicion, other notable leads continued to roll in. The most promising of these related to the footage of vehicles police released, as well as their appeals for dashcam footage. As more information came in, investigators continued to narrow their window of interest around smaller segments of time, until by the end of November, they had zeroed in on just a 5-minute period of traffic on the Captain Cook Highway. A couple of weeks later, tips were leaked to the Australian press that police had focused their search on a single suspect, an Indian national named Rajinder Singh. Singh had moved to Australia years earlier with his family, where he had worked as a nurse in Innisfail, roughly 90 kilometers south of Cairns. He reportedly became a suspect after investigators were able to triangulate security and dashcam footage of his vehicle with the location that Toya's cell phone had been in at the time she went missing. This was further corroborated by reports from several witnesses who told police that Singh had been acting strangely around the time of Toya's murder, and that he had been seen with bite and scratch marks on his body that evening. Making things even more suspicious, it was reported that Singh had visited Cairns on the day of Toya's murder, only to hurriedly return later that evening and purchase a plane ticket to Sydney. After that, he spent several hours with his sister before flying back to his home city of Amritsar, India. He left behind his wife and 3 children, and soon after stopped using his debit and credit cards. Perhaps most damning of all, there were also reports in the media that police had found unknown physical evidence at the scene of Toya's murder that may have been a match to Singh. However, we should stress that this information has never been confirmed by authorities and remains highly speculative. Following the leaked information about their investigation, police disputed that Singh was the only suspect in the case and told the public to remain cautious. Though they admitted that Singh was wanted for questioning, they stressed that this did not necessarily mean that he was guilty. After 2 months of rapid progress, it was here that the case hit a standstill. Now that Singh was no longer in the country, Australian authorities were left with the complex task of not only tracking him down, but working with their counterparts in India to make sure that he could actually be extradited to face questioning. This was made somewhat more promising by the fact that Australia and India do have a mutual extradition treaty, but still, few additional updates were given to the public in the following months. In November of 2019, just a short time after the first anniversary of Toya's murder, Indian authorities told reporters that they had yet to receive a formal extradition request for Singh. The request was needed before police in India could begin to track him down or make an arrest. Soon after, officials in Australia announced that the request had slowly been working its way through the proper legal channels. However, it was clear that the family felt that not enough was being done, and that they were starting to become frustrated with the endless bureaucracy and slow progress being made. Sadly, this would be far from the end of the family's wait for justice. Just last month in March, it was announced that the formal request for Rajinder Singh's arrest and extradition had been finalized by Australian authorities and would next be submitted to India. Though officials declined to specify what had caused the process to take so long, Assistant Minister to the Attorney General Amanda Stoker commented, quote, "Extradition requests vary considerably in complexity and can depend on a number of factors, including the criminal offenses, the criminal conduct underlying those offenses, and the volume of the documentation required to make a valid extradition request to another country, as well as the relevant country's own legal processes." In a statement where he said the family was pleased by the development, Far North Queensland MP Warren Entsch elaborated on the process slightly, claiming that Indian authorities had required an extraordinary amount of evidence for them to consider Australia's request, and that considerable time went into collecting that evidence and making sure that it was correct. He also stressed that even if the extradition order was acted on, there could be another long wait before it was determined whether Singh would actually be forced to return to Australia. In particular, Singh could contest the extradition, which would then have to work its way through an additional court process. Because this latest news is so recent, it seems that for now, the fate of the Toyah Cordingley case remains in a sort of gut-wrenching limbo. The extradition order is definitely a positive update, but it seems that it is only a minor step in a very uncertain process. At the same time, it's unclear what, if any other angles, Australian authorities are continuing to examine in the case. Though they previously claimed that Singh was not the only suspect, the disproportionate focus on him in the case, as well as the lack of announcements leading in any other direction, make this claim somewhat difficult to believe. Right now, it appears that all we can do is remain optimistic for Toyah Cordingley's family, and hope that they soon get the closure that they deserve. Do you have an idea for a future video you'd like to see? Tell us about it in the comments section below. As always, if you enjoyed our video, don't forget to like and subscribe to Crime Zone for more true crime content like this, making sure to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest releases. Thank you for watching.